was a man in his 70s who had been in hospital for some time and had acquired his COVID-19 whilst traveling outside of Canada a number of weeks ago. We now have 1,305 people, and I've checked those numbers today, who have fully recovered from COVID-19 in British Columbia. We've spoken extensively over the last many days and weeks about our testing strategy, and I just wanted to reiterate that we are changing and modifying as we do based on the circumstances that we have here in British Columbia, and our testing strategy will continue to evolve. Right now, as we've talked about, testing is available to anybody in our community who has symptoms of COVID-19, including even very mild symptoms, and is also being used quite extensively, as we've talked about, for identification and investigation of clusters, because we recognize that sometimes, particularly in some of the workplace clusters that we've been looking at and at the federal prison and our long-term care outbreaks, that people can have very mild illness or may have unrecognized illness or may have reasons why they are reluctant to reveal that they're feeling unwell or they have some mild illness, and it could be related to concerns about employment and concerns about passing it on to others. So we have taken an approach of having very broad testing in those types of environments to make sure that we catch everybody, even people who might have very mild or no symptoms at all. It's very important for us to understand, however, that random testing in the community of anybody with no symptoms is of very little value to us with the current tests that we have. In fact, that type of testing leads to both false positives and false negatives. And for a variety of reasons, it's not a reliable mechanism to understand what's happening in our communities when it's used that way. The best things and the most important things we need to continue to do in our communities, all of us now, is to continue to clean our hands regularly, to not touch our face, to cover our cough and sneezes, to ensure we're keeping our safe physical distance, and to have a very, very sensitive threshold for staying home and staying away from others if we're not feeling well. It's important for us to understand as well where testing can help us, and I've talked about some of the outbreaks, and just to talk about some of the outbreaks that we've had in the past where this has been really important. You will recall early on in our pandemic here in British Columbia, we had a number of cases who were related to a dental conference that was being held in Vancouver. And just to give people an update, we now have a total of 87 people who were associated with that conference here in British Columbia. And I know there are additional people in other provinces and around the world who had attended that event. And we know that there was at least one, but probably several people who had COVID-19, most of them probably not recognizing it during the time they were at that event, and it was spread. And as of course we're all aware here in British Columbia, we had one death in a dentist associated with that conference. The other thing that we are doing that is really important for our next strategy, our next phase, is making sure that we're monitoring everybody that's coming into British Columbia from outside the country. And that includes the measures that we put in place to enhance the federal measures at our borders for people who are returning to British Columbia. And we've assessed over 15,000 people who have returned to British Columbia. These are Canadians who have returned home. Often they had been away for often many years. And over 15,000 since we started this on April 10th. We reviewed of those 15,000, but some of them needed assistance, and over 350 people needed additional support to be able